Welcome aboard. The adventure begins.
Welcome to Pondwater, an audio adventure. Written by Brenda Fire Eagle Biddix and Ryan Milletti. Disclaimer: to clarify that this audiobook is a work of fiction and not based on real events or people.
Curled up in the dim glow of a dashboard light, I read and reread every line, and I know it's not perfect. Every sale of these books goes to help families and kids with their medical debts here in America. So now it's time for you to enjoy this audiobook completely for free, because I'm not in it for the money. We're not readers anymore. Together, we're changing lives through books. Let's go ahead and dive in.
The Pond. With snacks close at hand, Jared sat down in his recliner and reached for the remote control, bringing the TV to life. Jared's fingers tapped impatiently on the armrest, his heart racing as he hungered for the thrill of the game. The day's excitement had built up like storm clouds before a clash of titans. Chelsea against Liverpool in the Premier League. Suddenly, a flash of light or reflection caught his attention to the left. The elderly woman Bobby Joe, who lived about 60 feet away in the next house, had come out on her deck. She appeared lost, her eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for something elusive. Her bony fingers clutched a bucket as she crossed the street and walked to the pond a short distance away. Jared was curious, a question mark forming in the back of his mind. What would she want with that stagnant water from that little pond? He continued watching, taking his attention away from the match that was about to begin. It was odd. She dipped a bucket of water from the murky depths of the pond. Then, looking around again, she submerged herself in the water, her limbs moving with an eerie grace. Jared continued watching as if mesmerized. Cloaked in the filth of the pond, the woman resurfaced, her bucket brimming with the muddy liquid. She treads carefully back to her house, trying to stay unseen. Casting one last glance around, she hesitated before the shadows of her home swallowed her whole. There was something he couldn't put his finger on. What on earth could be her motive? Jared mused aloud. Jared returned to the roaring match. The allure of the swamp creature seemed like a distant echo in his mind. Yet the match had all the promises of action that he was hoping for. That night, as he lay in the darkness, the woman haunted his thoughts. Her presence had become an unnerving addition to the once tranquil community. He thought little of her when she moved into the little cottage a few weeks before. The woman must be about 80 years old. At least, he thought about her appearance. But there was something about the way she hopped into the pond. Also, she had a motley assortment of people in and out since her arrival. But he dismissed it because it was just another person moving into the neighborhood. Thinking back, the police had been to her house 3 times for disturbances. Jared's mind raced as he recalled the unsettling events, the seeds of suspicion taking root in his consciousness. He had hoped that these events would not be setting stage for something else. Elmhurst was a quiet community. Everyone watched out for each other's house, a great neighborhood watch system. In the 10 years Jared had lived there has only been one incident of the police being called because of gunshots on New Year's Eve. Gunshots echoed through the night. They didn't sound close, but got his attention. Although an officer made inquiries around the neighborhood asking whether anyone had heard, nothing came of it. Jared, over the next week, paid more attention to people coming and going next door. Every weekend began the parade of slovenly visitors wearing little attire. Their ill-fitting tattered jeans or shorts, no shirts for the guys, and short shorts and bras for the females. Each carried a 6-pack or 12-pack of their favorite beer, and most of them stayed on the inside of the house. True to form, that is when the parade started again. It was a spectacle that repeated itself, a macabre dance of men and women seeking solace in the recesses of the elderly woman's truck, their intentions shrouded in secrecy. A man would walk from her house to her truck and sit with her. After 10 or 15 minutes, he would then go back inside. A short time later, another person would come out to her truck, sit there for 10 or 15 minutes, and then go back inside. Both men and women are taking part in this ritual. Jared did not see what they were doing, but it didn't take a lot of imagination to figure out that it was something illicit. He replayed the day's events in his mind as he lay there staring at the ceiling. The next morning, the circus began anew. The clash of blue lights next door caught Jared's attention. Later, He learned someone had been climbing in and out of the woman's windows. The person was a man in his late 30s or early 40s, covered in tattoos. His pants were falling off, leaving him exposed. Bobby Joe had called the police herself. Additionally, the landlord found a hypodermic syringe in the driveway. Although no one was arrested, the event made Jared feel uneasy. It was enough to change the protocol for things around the neighborhood. Jared made sure to start locking his truck. That night, the haunting wail of police sirens shattered the silence. The woman's story was far from over. Little did he know this was only the beginning of a descent into the bizarre, a journey that would stretch the boundaries of his imagination. Whispering Brew. Spring faded into summer, and Jared scarcely noticed that his life started to revolve around the happenings of his neighbor's cottage. One early morning he stood at the kitchen window, cradling a hot cup of coffee. He was observing every detail of the dwelling next door. Boxes of all sizes and a plastic tote were strewn across the front porch, while a square of carpeting or car floor mat dangled from the handrails. Towards the rear of the house, the two windows facing him belonged to bedrooms. The vinyl shades were badly broken, and the louvers were bent out of shape. As he sipped the steaming coffee, its rich aroma set a tranquil tone for the day. Turning away from the window, Jared finished his breakfast preparations. It was Saturday. He didn't have to go to work today and had a chance to catch another exciting soccer match. No Premier League games today. The La Liga promised some interesting action. "This is where it's at," he murmured as he headed into the living room with his second cup of coffee. It was early to turn on the TV, so he stood in the living room window, looking out at the neighbor's clutter. 3 vehicles occupied her driveway, though vehicles seemed too broad a term. 2 rugged trucks and a car, a testament to diverse tastes. The participants for another weekend party had arrived after he went to bed the night before. As he observed the morning activities, the woman in her late 30s or 40s emerged and started rummaging through the boxes, hanging clothes over the rails. 2 young men emerged after her, smoking as they walked past the woman, and went to the truck before leaving the property. Soon after, Bobby Joe emerged from the house and started digging through the boxes along with the other women. Though Jared couldn't hear what they were saying, they were evidently discussing the clothing. When the truck returned, the women took some items inside, and the rest went back into the truck, returning to wherever they had come from. Jared put his cup on the side table next to his recliner. The ongoing scene echoed the events from a few weekends ago, yet he had initially brushed off those incidents as Bobby Joe's settling in. What bothered him? Jared had a keen perception honed by his time as a Navy SEAL. The smallest detail could make or break a mission, meaning life or death. He wasn't paranoid, but he sensed something was amiss that he couldn't quite identify. Maybe it was just the way she enjoyed the scummy pond water. Sunday would bring its own set of events. Jared was doing his laundry when he heard a thump, the sound of something striking the side of his house. He went to the window and saw 2 young men, around 18 to 20, tossing a frisbee. The frisbee hadn't done any damage, so he let it go without comment. However, only a few minutes passed when something struck the kitchen window. Jared went outside to speak with the boys. "What's up, guys?" he asked. They mumbled apologies, their eyes darting between the frisbee and Jared. "Try to be careful," he told them. "You wouldn't want to break a window." Amazingly, the weekend ended without any police presence in the neighborhood. In the evening, Bobby Joe walked to the pond with a pail in hand and filled the bucket, returning to her house. Jared's mind raced with questions. What was she doing with the pond water? He pondered. The bizarre scene had etched itself into his thoughts, an itch he couldn't scratch, adding to the growing list of mysteries surrounding his neighbor. He couldn't shake the feeling something was off. So he decided to investigate further. As the sun rested, Jared took a walk around the neighborhood, hoping to learn more about the pond. He struck up a conversation with an older neighbor who had lived in the area for decades. As they chatted, Jared casually mentioned the pond and Bobby Joe's peculiar habit of collecting water from it. The neighbor's face shifted, a shadow crossing his features. "You know," he began, his voice dropping conspiratorially, "there's been some talk around here. Some say that a few local companies have been dumping waste into the pond for years. They're trying to keep it hush-hush. But the pond's become toxic.
wildlife steer clear of it, and the plants around here are starting to wither.
Jared's heart raced as he listened to the troubling news. He couldn't understand why Bobby Joe would use the toxic water, but he knew he had to find out more. Later that night, rest eluded Jared, a gnawing anticipation for answers keeping him awake, his thoughts circling the pond and its mysterious connection to Bobby Joe. Finally, he couldn't take it any longer. Grabbing a flashlight, he slipped out of his house and made his way to the pond. As he approached, the air grew thick and heavy, the smell of decay hanging around. He could see the water's unnatural sheen under the pale moonlight. The plants nearby looked sickly and wilted. As he shined his flashlight over the water, he noticed strange murky etchings on the ground near the pond's edge, like remnants of markings and bones. Suddenly, a barely audible bubble broke the silence, tugging his focus like an insistent whisper. It seemed to be coming from the center of the pond. He watched in shock as the bubbles grew larger and more frequent. The water began to churn, and Jared's heart pounded in his chest. As he shined his flashlight toward the disturbance, he gasped in horror. A hand was reaching out of the water, fingers grasping desperately at the air. The sight sent shivers down his spine, and his instinct screamed at him to run. But he couldn't tear his eyes away. Just as suddenly as it appeared, the hand slipped back beneath the surface, leaving only ripples in its wake. The pond fell still, and the eerie silence that followed sent a chill down Jared's spine.
Drink.
Jared stood amongst the trees, the hush of the woods wrapping around him like a soft embrace. He knelt down, the earth beneath him cool and damp, and caught a scent of decay on the breeze. Determination surged through his bones, a firm knot accompanying his decision to head home. The truth lay ahead, waiting to be unearthed. The next day, Jared leaned back in his chair, feet propped up on the porch rail, hat pulled low over his eyes. He seemed to be napping, but beneath the brim of his hat he watched the world around him. He listened to the rustling leaves and the whispers of the forest, his senses sharp. His neighbor arrived, and Jared played ignorance, managing only a fleeting glimpse of her half-hearted wave, a gesture of strained neighborliness. He remained still, his thoughts wondering if what he saw in the pond last night was real. The sounds of nature swirled around him as he pondered the events in Acts chapter 10, the story of Peter and the Roman centurion. He focused on the final verse, which spoke of not calling unclean what God had made clean. Who could truly judge the actions of another? For more than a decade, Jared had called this place home, his memories entwined with the pond that once thrived nearby. As he thought of the neighbor in the pond, he sensed a connection between them. If he could untangle that bond, he might uncover the truth that lay hidden beneath the surface, the mystery calling to him like a siren's song. Jared knew he would not rest until he found the answers he sought. His eyes remained fixed on the neighbor's house while the elderly woman walked onto her porch. She held a steaming cup of coffee in her hand. His imagination conjured a startling scene, the woman dragging a bucket of grungy pond water inside. She tipped it up and filled her coffee pot with the murky, stagnant water. He saw in his mind's eye the black, viscous liquid frothing and bubbling as it slopped into her cup. With horror, Jared pictured her raising the mug to her lips, the dark sludge slipping past her tongue. The idea of cruel fingers crawling the inside of her throat on the way down. He shuddered at the thought of it all. "Jared!" A woman's voice sliced through his gruesome reverie. Her tone was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the terrors he'd just envisioned. He blinked, forcing the horrifying images out of his mind as he reluctantly acknowledged her greeting. It was the neighbor. Unsure of what lay hidden beneath her friendly facade, Jared knew he must tread carefully, for there was a darkness lurking in the shadows, and he would do whatever it took to bring it to light. The elderly woman beckoned Jared to come over, and he nodded in agreement. Standing up, he sensed an opportunity to uncover the truth. As he walked toward her, his mind raced with questions and suspicions. Did she know about the pond's contamination, or did she think the waters were clean? He didn't know. But one thing was for sure, it wasn't his property. The pond's potential contamination gnawed at Jared's mind. He recalled the EPA's action against the company that carelessly discarded the toxic wastewater, leaving countless residents without clean wells. The pond's connection couldn't be ignored. As he approached the woman, he couldn't help but wonder what she was doing with all the water from the pond. If it was toxic, what would the consequences be? The air grew thick with tension as his imagination painted ghastly scenarios, each brushstroke etching unease deeper into his senses. The elderly woman seemed oblivious to the storm brewing inside Jared's mind, greeting him with a smile. She gracefully acknowledged him with her coffee cup steaming in her hand. As they exchanged pleasantries, Jared's eyes darted around, searching for clues or answers to the questions that tormented him. He knew he had to be cautious, yet he couldn't shake the urgency that pulsed through his veins. He needed to learn the truth about the pond and the woman's intentions. The stakes were high, and the time ticked by, a relentless reminder of urgency. As she offered him a cup, he declined. "I'm good for the day." "Can you take me to the store?" she insisted. "I need some cigarettes." "Of course. I'd be happy to give you a ride," Jared replied, trying to hide the concern in his voice. They made their way to his truck, and as they settled in, he began to search for a way to bring up the pond and the potential danger it posed. As they drove, Jared finally mustered up the courage to ask, "I saw you get a bucket of water out of the pond earlier. What were you using the water for?" The elderly woman chuckled and replied, "Oh, that? I was just getting some water for my weekly facial and mud bath. I've been doing it for years. Keeps my skin looking young and fresh." Jared's eyes widened in disbelief. "You do realize that the pond might be toxic, right? There's been a lot of talk about that factory nearby contaminating the water. It could be dangerous to use it on your skin." The woman laughed heartedly at his concern. "Oh, Jared, always one for conspiracy theories. I've been using the water for decades, and I'm still alive and kicking. A little mud never hurt anyone." Jared sighed, his skepticism hanging like a cloud despite her breezy disregard. He wanted to press the issue further, but didn't want to upset her. As they pulled into the parking lot of the store, he decided to let it go for the moment. He couldn't force her to believe him, but he was determined to find concrete evidence of the pond's toxicity. He would prove his suspicions were not unfounded, and hopefully save her and others from any potential harm caused by the contaminated water. As they pulled into the gas station, the elderly woman hopped out of the truck and went inside to purchase her cigarettes. She quickly returned, looking a bit flustered. "Jared, dear, I'm $1 short. Would you happen to have some spare change?" Jared rolled his eyes and mumbled under his breath, "Of course." He shuffled through the ashtray, gathering a handful of coins. "Here you go." "Thank you, dear," she said with a grateful smile. She went back inside, and Jared waited, tapping the steering wheel with his thumbs. When she returned, he drove her home, the tension surrounding the pond's potential toxicity still lingering in the air. Once he dropped her off, Jared decided he couldn't let the issue rest. He needed to know the truth about the pond. He drove straight to the local health department, hoping to find a way to test the water himself. Upon arrival, he explained his concerns to the receptionist, who then directed him to the appropriate department. A helpful employee provided Jared with a sterile jar and instructions on how to collect the water sample for testing. Jared thanked them and immediately drove back to the pond. As he scooped up the water, he couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. As his eyes swept across the banks of the pond, he saw a few plants dying. The fate of others in the community rested in his hands. However, deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking beneath the surface. He noticed something strange. The water seemed to be moving. There appeared to be something alive in the sample. A sample of suspicion. Jared rushed the water sample back to the health department, keeping a close eye on the ripples across the surface as creatures moved within. He couldn't wait to find out what these mysterious organisms were and if they had any connection to the pond's alleged toxicity. Upon reaching the health department, Jared eagerly presented the sample to the technician, urgently explaining his discovery of strange creatures in the water. The technician took a cursory glance at the sample and nonchalantly dismissed Jared's concerns. "Oh, those are just tadpoles, nothing to worry about." Jared was surprised by the technician's dismissal. Tadpoles? But you didn't even test the water. I thought the whole point was to determine whether the pond was toxic or not. The technician seemed unfazed by Jared's frustration. Look, if there are tadpoles in the water, it's a good sign the water isn't toxic. Since tadpoles are sensitive to pollutants, their presence in the pond suggests that the water might be safe. Jared wasn't convinced by this explanation. The creatures he had seen didn't look like any tadpoles he'd ever came across, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. But with the health department unwilling to investigate further, he knew he needed to take matters into his own hands. With a determination to reveal the truth, Jared decided to conduct his own research on the pond and its potential hazards. He would gather information, study the creatures he discovered, and find a way to protect the community from any possible danger. Despite the uncertain and challenging path ahead, Jared knew that he couldn't turn back now. The fate of the elderly woman, the pond, the mysterious creatures all depended on him. While driving back to the pond, he decided to call his old army friend, John, now holding a prominent role in the State Environmental Protection Agency. As the phone rang, he wondered how long it had been since they last spoke. "Hey, John," Jared greeted warmly when his friend picked up. "It's been a while, man. How's life treating you after the Army?" John chuckled.
Hey, Jared. Good to hear from you. Yeah, it's been quite an adjustment, but I'm doing well. I've got a steady job. I'm really enjoying the work I'm doing for the environment. How about you? How's life on your end?
Jared updated John on his post-Navy life, sharing the highs, lows, and changes he had experienced. As they caught up, the conversation flowed easily, just like old times. After a while, John asked,
So what's going on with you these days? What made you call?
After a brief pause, Jared recalled, "Remember when you said I could call you anytime I needed anything? I think I need to cash in on that favor. There's a company in town that I believe has contaminated the local pond. Plants are dying around it, but there's this elderly woman who's using the water for her beauty treatments. I'm really concerned the water might be harmful." John's tone turned serious.
Of course, Jared. You know I've always got your back. Send me a water sample, and I'll make sure it gets tested properly. We'll get to the bottom of this.
Relieved and grateful for his friend's assistance, Jared parked near the pond and made his way back to the water's edge. As he knelt down to collect a new sample, he was suddenly and aggressively pushed from behind, causing him to lose his balance and fall into the pond. The cold water shocked his system as he struggled to stay afloat, disoriented by the unexpected attack. Coughing and sputtering, Jared crawled out of the pond, his body shivering and his skin itching from the contaminated water. Knowing he needed to get clean as soon as possible, he rushed back to his house, the water sample carefully held in his hand. Dripping wet, he set the water sample on the kitchen counter and hurried into the bathroom. As he stepped into the shower, he could feel his eyes beginning to burn, a worrying reminder of his exposure to the potentially toxic water. Jared scrubbed himself clean, desperate to rid his body of any contaminants that might have clung to his skin. Finally, he stepped out of the shower, feeling significantly better. As he dried off, Jared's thoughts returned to the water sample he had left on the counter. He knew he needed to send it to John as quickly as possible to get the answers they needed. However, as he walked back into the kitchen, he was shocked to find that the water sample was gone. Dirty dog. Jared couldn't see himself getting another testing jar from the health department. As he got dressed and looked around the house, he didn't discover anything. So, he knew what he had to do. Before he left, he took one last glance at his front door to ensure that he had locked it. The ease and comfort of the past decade living around here seemed a distant memory now. He went to Walmart and bought 24 canning jars, just in case he needed them. Returning home in the evening, he filled the jar with pond water. He included some of the life forms he'd seen earlier. Jared had a restless night. He sensed the change in the air, a big shift coming to their community. Morning found him already on the road, heading east toward Raleigh. It was a long drive from western North Carolina, but the early start allowed him to avoid the worst of the traffic. His mind played back the events of the past few days as the sky shifted from an indigo of pre-dawn to a tapestry of pink, yellow, and orange. Sunlight broke through the treetops, casting long-reaching shadows. His thoughts, however, were clouded with uncertainty and worry. Once he arrived in Raleigh, he met up with John to deliver the water sample. John, greeted him with a jovial.
You dirty dog.
After catching up, Jared learned that his friend had retired due to disability.
Look at you, you dried up squid.
John teased. Jared joked, "So this is what old soldiers become when they get put out to pasture." The friendly military banter provided a brief reprieve from his worries. As they parted, Jared decided to stay in town for a few days. Keen on getting the test results as soon as possible, he checked into a hotel, each passing day marked by growing anticipation and concern. After a couple of days, he left a voicemail for John but received no response. His anxiety ate away at him as the days passed. Why wasn't John responding? Finally, he decided to visit the EPA's headquarters. On his way, he was met with a chilling revelation. John was missing. Jared's anxiety built as he walked up to the front desk. He asked the receptionist if John was available, but the look on her face made his heart sink. "I'm afraid John hasn't been in for several days now. We're all quite worried," she admitted, concern lining her face. His gut twisted at her words, his worst fears starting to take shape. John missing? Right when they were on the cusp of uncovering the secrets of the pond? It couldn't be a coincidence. "But," the receptionist continued, "he left an envelope for you." She handed Jared a manila envelope marked with his name. Inside were test results from the water sample. He quickly scanned through the papers, his pulse quickening. The results were more troubling than he feared. The water was highly toxic, laced with a mix of heavy metals and unknown organic compounds. Jared thanked the receptionist and left the building, his mind a whirl of thoughts. The disappearance of his friend, the toxic water, the woman bathing in it, all of it swirled together in a maelstrom of uncertainty and fear. He knew he had to act, but his next steps were unclear, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a question lingered. Was he too now a target? Signs. Jared's mind spun with a whirlwind of questions. What had happened to John? How would he address the pollution issues without him? What should he do about his eccentric neighbor? Should he intervene? Or just let people carry on with their lives, irrespective of the consequences? The onslaught of questions and the potential scenarios followed him into the night, rendering his sleep restless and disjointed. The new day chased away the remnants of the darkness. It was Friday. He got dressed, grabbed a coffee, and headed out the door. His friend Alan had a military surplus store at the local flea market. During the weekends, Jared would help Alan by opening a second location for his surplus items. Plus, he needed to show his friend the report about the pond. They were both local friends, after all. It was a welcome distraction and a modest income on the side. On Saturday evening, after closing up at 6 p.m., Jared grabbed some dinner and began the drive home. As he neared his house, he saw his strange neighbor sprinting between their homes, her arms flailing in the air. With a sigh, he wondered what she was up to this time. Stepping out of his truck cautiously, he was met with a barrage of accusations.
"Jared, what did you do? I know it was you! Just wait till you see what I did with your trash!"
He was baffled, clueless as to what she was going on about. He locked his truck, apprehensive about what awaited him. As he turned the corner of his house, his eyes landed on a shocking sight. A pile of signs were strewn about his porch, some reading "Toxic by order of the EPA, no trespassing." He reached into his back pocket for his phone, swiftly dialing the sheriff's office to report the situation. The unexpected detour on his path and the menacing signs left him with one question. From where could they have possibly come? The realization hit him then. His fight to save the community was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The deputy sheriff documented the situation with a series of photos before heading over to have a chat with Jared's unpredictable neighbor. Meanwhile, Jared busied himself with tidying up the mess on his porch, stacking the signs neatly in one corner. He watched through his windows as the officer engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with his neighbor. The EPA's intervention was unexpected, but he was glad to see that the issue was being taken seriously. A firm knock on the door brought him back to reality. He opened it up to find the sheriff standing on his porch. The officer was professional, yet weary as he explained, "I told Miss Bobby Jensen that you were as surprised as she was to see the signs. She seemed convinced there was some conspiracy at play here and that you're a part of it, saying that the government wants everyone to depend on city water. I advised her against removing the signs again and warned her that any further tampering could lead to citations for vandalism and defacing public property. It may be a stretch, but hopefully it'll deter her from causing more trouble. With a nod, Jared thanked the deputy, his mind already jumping back to the alarming contents of the report he had left in his truck. As he headed outside to retrieve it, he caught sight of Bobby Joe, scrutinizing the deputy as he placed the signs back by the pond. The creak of his truck door drew her attention his way.
I know this is your doing! You can't just boss people around!
She screeched, her voice grating against the peaceful evening air. Jared chose to ignore her outbursts and her altogether, not wanting to engage in a fruitless argument. Back inside, he sunk into his recliner, the report laid out before him. His eyes scanned the list of unpronounceable toxins and carcinogens, settling on a chilling warning. Long-term exposure may be hazardous to your health. He let out a deep sigh. The decision on his next move was a daunting one. For now, he decided he would sleep on it and reach out to John the next day. Then, Jared's eyes were glued to the narrow view through the blinds. His pulse raced as he watched Bobby Joe at the pond again, casually looking around with her trusty bucket at her side. As she plunged her bucket into the muck of the water, an unexpected stir unsettled the surface. It wasn't the usual splash that the impact of the bucket created. No, this was something different. But still her hand dove into the water, extracting something amidst the muddy silt. Her joy was palpable, even from this distance. Bobby Joe's jubilant display sent a jolt of shock through Jared. He found himself unable to break away from the sight, riveted by a mixture of fascination and dread. As he watched her rush back towards her house, treasures in hand, he could not shake off the feeling that something was wrong, terribly wrong. There was no clear path ahead, but one thing was for certain. This quiet little town was about to change. The final rays of the setting sun seemed to echo this ominous feeling. The trees around the pond created dark shadows that reached out like hands ready to pull them all into an abyss of the unknown. Thickens. The phone trilled and jolted Jared from his disturbing dreams. Glancing at the clock, he noted the early hour and hesitated before picking up the call. It was John.
Hey, buddy. Sorry about not being in touch. Something came up.
John's voice held an unusual edge. What's going on, John? You sounded urgent.
Listen, Jared, I've been running some tests here in Annapolis. I got your message about the signs and followed up with my boss. The local EPA acted on it and put up signs yesterday.
John explained. Jared sighed, relief washing over him. His report hadn't been dismissed, but Jared could tell something else was going on. John continued. His tone hinted at deeper concerns.
By the way, Jared, how far are you from the original spill site?
Jared considered the distance, visualizing the lay of the land in his mind. Maybe 2 or 3 miles, but the pond is within clear view of my house. John was silent for a beat.
Okay, that's close, Jared. Closer than I was counting on. The tests we ran. It's been only a couple of years since the spill. And these microbes in the pond are already mutating.
Mutating? Jared echoed, the word hanging heavy between them.
Yeah, Jared. The water sample you gave us didn't have in CNF the data, or sledgeworms. What we found is way far more than that. We don't even know what it is. But whatever it isn't good. I'd stay as far away from that pond as possible.
As Jared ended the call, he felt the weight of John's words. Shaking off his unease, he got up and started his morning routine, a hot shower, some strong coffee, and scrambled eggs. Military habits die hard, but he wasn't feeling well. He savored his breakfast, needing the comfort of normalcy amid the chaos. As he rose from the table, he felt queasy, like a sickness flooded through his body in the matter of minutes. Taking a deep breath, he remembered falling into the pond. With a sense of urgency, Jared knew he had to meet up with Alan at the military surplus store. Since he was also close to the same water source, he had to tell Alan about the contamination. Racing to the store in his truck, Jared found Alan outside of the store like usual, just talking. Alan picked up a blade of grass and absent-mindedly chewed on it while thinking. "Hey, Alan." "Hey, man." Alan greeted as Jared stepped out of the truck. "Learned anything new about old Bobby Joe?" "She's collecting muck from the pond," Jared admitted, his voice tinged with concern. "The EPA shut down the whole area, and she believes it's some kind of conspiracy to force us to use the city water." Alan's expression turned serious as he processed the information. "Do you think I should get the water tested at my property too?" he asked, contemplating the potential risks. "I think it might be a good idea, Alan," Jared replied, his voice filled with conviction. "There's more to this than we initially thought, and that's not all, man. Something is mutating in the water." A heavy silence hung between them as Alan absorbed the gravity of the situation, the toxic pond and the mysterious mutations. It was clear that they were dealing with something far more dangerous than they originally had anticipated. The plot thickened, and the stakes soared higher with each passing moment. Jared realized that he had unwittingly become the central figure in his unfolding mystery. "Mind if we head up to the pond together?" Alan suggested with a determined glint in his eyes. "I'd like to see it for myself." "Hop in," Jared replied, his sense of urgency growing. As they sped down the road, anticipation filled the air. Pulling into Jared's yard, they noticed the absence of any activity at Bobby Joe's house. After getting out of the truck, Alan spat out the long piece of grass he had been chewing on since they left the store. He stepped back, plucking a fresh piece of grass from the ground and started chewing on it. "It looks like it's alive, to be honest." Alan gasped, his voice trembling with unease. Their eyes widened as they watched the water. The pond seemed to churn and darken, a shadowy presence rising from the depths. And then Alan pointed out something in those shadows to Jared, a massive wriggling shape slithering across the bottom of the pond. Sickness. The creature churned up a cloud of sediment in the pond, and they lost sight of it. The ripples spread outwards, carrying an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. Something monstrous was lurking beneath the surface. They were about to uncover a truth that defied their wildest imaginations. They needed to create a plan. For now, Jared needed medical attention. Jared looked over at Alan, and they shared a confirming nod. Something had to be done. After dropping Alan off at the military surplus store, Jared made his way to the VA hospital. His queasiness was growing more unbearable with each passing moment. A needle pierced his skin, drawing a sample of blood that was immediately sent off to a lab. Returning home, Jared locked his door behind him, seeking solace within the confines of his sanctuary. He called Alan on the phone about his nausea, and they both agreed that he wouldn't be opening the store over the weekend. Once he got to feeling better, he needed to get back up with Alan. A couple days passed, and the phone rang, its shrill tone emanating from an unfamiliar source. His heart skipped a beat as he realized it was the CDC on the line. The lab results had been reported, and the news they carried was chilling. The voice on the other end was blunt and matter-of-fact, asking about potential enemies who might wish harm upon him. His toxin levels were dangerously high, indicating a deliberate act of arsenic poisoning. The realization sent shivers down his spine, amplifying the urgency of their investigation. Back at the hospital, Jared underwent chelation, the treatment meant to purge his body of toxic substances. A small tan tablet dissolved in his mouth, turning his urine an unsettling shade of brown. They told him that week after week he would need to faithfully return to the doctor's office, each time giving a urine sample. Hopefully, he would notice it becoming progressively clearer. But the poisoning had taken its toll. Jared's once vibrant complexion paled, his skin losing its natural hue. The hyperpigmentation of his skin and the color changes were irreversible. Concerned glances followed him, but the hospital staff could only confirm that his condition was not contagious. He was a victim of a deliberate attack, the exact motives still unknown. Determined to share the unfolding events with Alan, Jared arranged the next meeting. As Alan stepped into his house, a sense of urgency hung in the air. Alan couldn't believe the look of Jared. Give me your phone," Alan demanded, his voice resolute. Alan, chewing on a piece of long grass as usual, realized he didn't want to be heard. They both surrendered their devices, powering them off. Alan sealed them away within the confines of the microwave. Inside, no signal could come or go, and their communication would remain hidden going forward. With the outside world temporarily cut off, they huddled together, their voices hushed but filled with conviction. They spoke of conspiracies, hidden agendas, and the lurking danger that cast its shadow over the small town. The air crackled with tension as they exchanged theories and fragments of pieces of information. Jared being poisoned was strange enough. Something big was at play, but the truth was out there. As they delved deeper into the darkness, Jared and Alan knew they had to return to the pond. Tonight. "Listen, Jared," Alan added, his voice filled with a mix of concern and determination. "I need you to stay behind. You're barely walking, and you can call if I get into any trouble." Jared couldn't believe what he was hearing, and a surge of adrenaline coursed through his veins. He protested. "But Alan, I can't stay here while you're at the pond. Whatever is out there, you need someone with you." Alan placed a firm hand on Jared's shoulder. "Trust me, my friend. I've been through worse situations than this. I need you to hold down the fort. I've got a weapon with me. I'll be back soon. Count on it." Jared nodded as he watched Alan disappear into the darkness. He watched the beam of Alan's flashlight weave through the dense trees. The light cast eerie shadows that danced with the wind. Jared's eyes followed the fading light until it disappeared completely. Alone in the silent darkness, Jared's senses sharpened, and he became acutely aware of every creak and rustle around him. Was it splashing he was hearing? Then, as if to snap Jared out of a trance, Alan's light illuminated his face. Alan shined it toward himself as if to say goodbye. This was odd. Alan leaned over and picked up something from the ground. It was too dark to see clearly, but Alan was chewing on something. A chill ran down Jared's spine. Was it a handful of grass? Why an entire handful? What had Alan found? What was he eating? The possibilities raced through his mind, but before he could gather his thoughts, Alan got in his car and disappeared. He didn't even tell Jared what he saw out there. The strangest part was their phones were still in the microwave, so he couldn't even call him to find out. Silence. Jared could barely sleep, but the day began even without him. Today, he was going to return to the hospital. Urgency grew as he prepared to leave, his urine sample in hand. The dark brown color persisted, reflecting the ongoing chelation process. Detoxing was taking its toll on his well-being. Frantically searching for his phone, he located it in the microwave. He also discovered Alan's forgotten device. He might as well keep Alan's phone on him. Arriving at the hospital, Jared's life began a whirlwind of doctors' research and questions. He wanted the doctors to shed more light on what was going on with him. What were the detrimental effects of toxic metals like arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury? What was chelation doing to him? Chelation was a process that involved the bonding of organic molecules with metals in his body. This pill he was taking was pulling the toxins out of him. Jared's understanding deepened as he learned how lead was sweet, which is why it was so dangerous. Despite a week of pills, Jared's urine remained dark. The color was a disheartening reminder of the lingering contamination inside him. Adding to his distress, there was still no word from John or the EPA about the toxic pond. Jared felt it was necessary to swing by the military surplus store on his way home. He knew Alan would be happy to get his phone back. Yet, to his disappointment, the store was closed, despite it scheduled to be open. Returning home, Jared decided to take a walk past the pond, hoping it would help. But the silence that enveloped the area was unsettling. No chirping crickets, no croaking frogs. It was an unnatural silence that chilled him to the bone. As Jared continued his solitary walk, he noticed Bobby Joe emerging from the pond, holding something on a tray. her unusual attire of booty shorts and a halter top, observing her pale complexion. Jared couldn't believe how determined she was to be in the pond. The objects on her tray weren't ordinary stones or pond debris. They were eggs. Small frog eggs, pulsating and writhing as if alive. Shock and horror washed over Jared as he realized the eggs were hatching on the tray. What kind of creatures could emerge from these eggs? Were they linked to the toxic state of the pond? The absence of frog croaks, the absence of sounds of life, only deepened the mystery. Instead of dropping the eggs, Bobby Joe cradled them with care. She had a glow illuminating her face. With a sense of purpose, she dashed back toward her house, the mound of hatching eggs held tightly in her grasp. She was so excited, in fact, she didn't even see Jared. Jared's disbelief morphed into a chilling realization. Bobby Joe was giving those things to her friends. Unnerved at the sight, Jared thought back to stories his grandmother told him. Stories about how someone ate fried worms insisting they were meat. The memory disgusted him, adding to the growing sense of dread that consumed him. The night grew quieter, devoid of even the lights of fireflies. However, the silence was shattered by the arrival of several cars next door. Bobby Joe was hosting another party. A woman covered in sores emerged from one of the cars, accompanied by a couple younger men. She was too skinny, too pale, and probably a cocaine user. Her bright yellow shorts stood out in the glow of porch lights. Overwhelmed by what he had seen, Jared retreated to his bedroom. He knew too much. Yet the ruckus noise gradually faded. He was finally left with nothing but the sound of his own breathing. Unfortunately, this was so odd it kept him up until he heard something even more strange outside. Bobby Joe, with a determined look on her face, was dragging something towards the pond. Jared's heart pounded in his chest as he saw the yellow shorts. Without hesitation, Jared grabbed his phone and made an emergency phone call as she pulled the body into the pond. Below the surface. Tension hung thick in the air as the police arrived at the pond, their flashlights piercing through the murky darkness. With cautious steps, they ventured closer, straining their eyes to see through the impenetrable veil of the water. Yet, their efforts yielded no results. There was nothing visible, nothing to confirm the horrifying scene that had unfolded just moments ago. Bobby Joe was nowhere to be found when the police arrived at her house, adding to the mounting unease that plagued Jared's thoughts. Who was she dragging towards the pond? It was too dark to see who they were. Sleep eluded him for the rest of the night. He replayed the disturbing events over and over again in his mind. But what disturbed him the most was that the police hadn't found anything. The following morning, Jared's phone broke the silence, jolting him awake. It was John, the environmental scientist.
Jared,
He announced over the phone.
I wanted to let you know that I'm taking everything very seriously. A team is stopping by to test the pond directly.
Better do something fast, Jared added, listening to silence on the other end of the call. John answered.
What do you mean? Is something else going on?
Oh, yeah. Jared spoke, his voice firm. There's someone out there in that pond, John. The line went silent, as John thought.
There's a lot of toxins in those waters, and things I can't talk about over the phone.
I understand. I'm going through chelation right now because of the pond. As the phone conversation came to an end, the days drifted by without a single sighting of Bobby Joe. For some reason, she had disappeared, and Jared didn't mind. Finally, the day arrived when the EPA's team descended on the pond. They erected a chain-link fence, effectively prohibiting any further trespassing. It was 10 feet beyond the perimeter of the pond. It was a precautionary measure, an attempt to ensure the safety of the community. Conveniently, Bobby Joe appeared, and she didn't take kindly to the restriction, voicing her objections loudly. Unable to contain his tension any longer, Jared called the police. As they arrived, he snapped and went outside. He approached Bobby Joe, a determined look etched in his face, confronting her about the incident at the pond. He demanded answers of who she was dragging towards the water's edge.
Are you insane?
She announced for everyone to hear. Her friends crowded around as Bobby Joe continued.
I've been out of town for the last couple days.
Her friends also defended her innocence, as they claimed she had been with them at their house indulging in mud bath sessions, making it impossible for her to be involved. Nobody was found, the officers interrupted, their words falling on frustrated ears. Jared's convictions wavered, his grip on the truth slipping further away. Yet he couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. It hinted that something was wrong. Something dark was hiding in the pond. In the dimming light of the sun, the atmosphere grew heavy with a sense of foreboding. As the community retreated into the embrace of slumber, a shadow emerged from the depths of darkness. It moved with purpose, undeterred by the cover of night. Jared lay awake in bed, his senses investigating every creak and rustle. He was there, straining to catch the faintest sound. And then came a subtle snip. The metallic kiss cut through the air. Was it coming from the chain-link fence? His heart raced as he continued to listen. Someone, shrouded in darkness, worked silently, and Jared was aware of it. Ting! The cold night air carried a sense of apprehension as Jared's instincts screamed at him to act. He was torn between confronting the trespasser and alerting the authorities. It was time to decide. Ting! Jared knew he couldn't ignore this any longer, couldn't let the darkness consume his community any further. Jared slipped out of bed, his feet finding familiar paths through the shadows. He was sweating, matching the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The crisp night air carried the scent of damp earth. There he saw it. The fence cut wide open. Shadows of deception. Driven by a sense of duty, Jared rushed to inspect the fence. His fears grew as he discovered the breach. The chain-link fence was cut open, but something was off. A wet trail glistened under the moon's watchful eye. Jared studied the trail of moisture, noticing that something had been dragged out of the depths of the pond. Questions swirled, taunting him with their unanswered riddles. What had happened? Who? A knot of unease formed in Jared's stomach, intertwined with his growing concerns. It was no longer just a matter of trespassing or defiance. There was a deeper motive at play. Did someone pull the body from the pond? The toxic pond was daring him to uncover its secrets. With resolute determination, Jared reached for his phone and dialed the emergency line. His voice trembled with urgency, but firmly he replayed the incident to the police. Every word carried him deeper into the pond. The answers eluded him, slipping through his fingers like whispers in the wind. Where had they gone? The person that cut open the fence. The moon cast a guiding light on him as he took a determined step forward. He followed the trail into the woods, away from the water. As Jared ventured deeper into the darkness, the damp earth beneath his feet lost the trail. He was too late. The flickering lights of approaching police cars pierced through the night, their arrival ripping apart the darkness. But Jared knew someone was running. He knew someone was hiding in the woods. As he walked out of the tree line towards the police, he pointed them towards the open fence. The officers noted the mucky trail leading to where Jared had come from. The following day, Alan turned back up, apologizing for his abrupt dismissal. Fetching his phone from Jared, they caught up on the latest events. The fence, the neighbors, and of course how the chelation was going. Alan overslept without his phone and didn't get the store opened. Oddly, he didn't remember much else from that. Days turned into weeks, and the summer heat bore down on the community. Jared had seen that the pond was beginning to gradually dry up. With each passing day, the water's murky surface receded, revealing a desolate landscape marred by the remnants of its toxic history. Jared and Ellen found themselves ushered into a dimly lit boardroom at the EPA's office. Their friend John stood up, exuding a sense of importance, and introduced Daryl Swan, who seemed to be the person in charge. They all took their seats and others joined them, ready to dive into the discussion. Swan wasted no time, getting straight to the point. "There's a reason we called this meeting," he began, "is to gather as much information as possible before our next phase of inquiry." He turned to Jared, trying to foster a more casual atmosphere. "Jared, if I may call you by your first name, you were the first to send in a specimen for testing, correct? Can you provide us with a comprehensive information about this area, including the flora, fauna, wildlife, the community that resides nearby? Tell us about the area." Jared nodded, taking a deep breath before recounting the history of the contamination. "Yes, the initial contamination occurred about 3 years ago when Olympic Global Precision spilled toxic waste into a nearby creek. They were ordered to clean it up and have since ceased operations there." Swain leaned in, showing genuine interest.
"We also have records showing that the site in question was about 3 miles from the initial spill site, With the recent specimen you provided, we're conducting a more in-depth study of the initial report. As a precaution, we fenced the area to prevent further sickness through contact, just like what happened to you."
"I've been out there too," Alan chimed in, eager to contribute. Swain turned to him, curious.
"Did you have direct contact with the water or plants there?"
he asked. Nope," Alan replied casually. Jared couldn't help but interject. "That's not entirely accurate. Alan has this habit of chewing on blades of grass, and he did it there as well." A smile played on Alan's lips as he shrugged. "Well, shucks, that ain't nothing. The grass there's good, even sweet," he confessed. Swain's expression turned serious.
"That may or may not be true," he said thoughtfully. "As a precaution, I'd feel better if we got a blood sample from you, Alan. Just to be sure. I'm sure you'd agree,"
Swain added, addressing Alan. Alan hesitated for a moment, then nodded in agreement.
"Yeah, sure. Better safe than sorry, as long as it don't cost me anything."
Before leaving, the phlebotomist drew 3 vials of blood from Alan to confirm he wasn't contaminated as well. As they settled in Jared's truck, a stack of paperwork sat between them, a testament to the pond. Page after page, Alan read through the details of the various chemicals found in the pond, naming off the side effects plaguing Jared from a chilling presence of arsenic and mercury. Alan's brows furrowed as he scanned through the documents, his mind swimming with curiosity. The pond was toxic, and Bobby Joe was the one that was insane. Lost in their examination, they arrived at Jared's house, the engine humming to a halt. Alan stepped out of the truck, his gaze fixed on the grass that carpeted the front yard. He plucked a blade, its vibrant green contrasting against the encroaching darkness of the pond. Casually, he began enjoying its sweet taste. Jared took up the paperwork, scanning the pages on the hood of his truck, a mixture of surprise and worry entrenched lines on his face. "Alan, the grass," he began, his voice laced with caution. You know, lead has a sweet flavor." A mischievous glint sparkled in Alan's eyes as he plucked a few more blades, his lips curling into a sly smile. "Well, then," he laughed with a dismissive voice, "guess we will find out when the results get back." Alan retreated to his own vehicle, the engine growling to life. Alan smiled and plucked some more long grass from the yard, savoring its taste. He then continued home, pulling to the end of Jared's driveway. As Jared turned to walk inside with the paperwork in hand, a sudden crash rang out, ripping through the air like shattered glass. The sound reverberated in his ears, sending tremors of panic through his body. Startled, he dropped the paperwork, his heart pounding in his chest. Alan's car was now twisted and broken, torn apart across the road. Glass shadows. Jared was abruptly jolted by the sound of the deafening crash. He hastily reached for his phone, fingers fumbling as he dialed 911. He described the harrowing scene, Alan's mangled car, a blue Chevy pickup on the road, and Alan pinned inside his vehicle, struggling for breath. The driver of the truck emerged, tattoos covering both arms and anger etched across his face. Clad in ill-fitting, revealing pants, he approached Jared, shouting accusations towards Alan. But Jared's piercing gaze silenced any further exchange of words. Rescue and the police were on their way. Jared assured Alan, who was pinned inside his overturned car, struggling for breath. "Hold on, buddy. Help is coming," he reassured, his voice filled with strength. In the aftermath, it was determined that Alan was at fault for failing to yield the right-of-way. As the ambulance whisked Alan away, Jared made a promise to his injured friend that he would take care of everything. He gathered Alan's personal belongings and keys before the wrecked car was loaded onto a rollback. With haste, Jared's Dodge Ram roared toward the hospital. His mind replayed the accident over and over again. Alan, battered and pinned, fighting for his life. The weight of the situation pressed upon him, as if the entire world had shifted onto his shoulders. The grim realization that Alan's road to recovery would be a long and challenging one. Arriving at the ER, Jared was greeted by a flurry of activity. Nurses and doctors rushed past him, their faces masked with a sense of urgency. Inquiring about Alan, he was directed to a bustling area marked as Area Number 5, where the sound of medical equipment hummed in the background. Approaching the intake nurse, Jared's heart raced as he stated, "My name is Jared Owens," his voice reflecting concern. The nurse glanced at him, flipped through the pages of Alan's chart. "Jared Owens?" she repeated, her voice tinged with recognition. "Cousin," she added, a hint of surprise coloring her tone. "You may go through. He's in room 507. They're preparing him for tests, so please be quick." "Cousin," Jared mumbled to himself, a mix of emotions churning up within him. He pushed open the door to room 507 and stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of Alan. Their gazes met, a silent understanding passing between them. Jared approached the bed and listened to Alan's voice filled with concern.
"Jared, they're doing tests,"
Alan mumbled softly, his voice laced with fatigue.
"They suspect my leg might need surgery. Don't worry about me, Jared. Just focus on healing both for yourself and for me."
The test results echoed the grim reality of Alan's injuries, a complex tangle of broken bones. Jared found his mind drifting back to a distant memory of when Alan and he were kids. Before their military days, Alan and Jared would run off to a rope swing by the river. The rope swing, once a source of amusement, betrayed Alan one day. A snap rang out and Alan crashed to the ground, twisting his leg. The pain was excruciating, and Jared vividly remembered the hours spent nursing his broken leg. They still liked being by the river, even if the rope swing was gone. It was then that they really formed a deep bond between them. Jared would carry Alan down to the river while Alan was still healing up. This was when Alan developed the habit of chewing on grass, weeks by the river, relaxing on the riverbank. As doctors rushed him into surgery, the impending procedure loomed like a giant in the dark. Surgeons were meticulously going to realign and stabilize his shattered legs, threading a web of metal rods and pins, creating a mechanical lifeline to his fractured limbs. Jared watched as his friend was wheeled away. Jared committed himself to staying at the hospital with Alan. He believed that the hospital would offer some relief. Maybe he just needed a break from the unsettling recent events. He returned home and gathered a few essential items with the plan to watch over Alan. Taking his chelation pill, he gazed out towards the pond. Gulping down, he noticed the prolonged drought had persisted. He clung to the hope that the entire pond would soon dry up, bringing an end to their troubles. He had a few things, and he double-checked the lock on his front door. Turning around, his gaze fell upon Bobby Joe, sprinting towards him with a wild look in her eyes, clutching a rock tightly in her hand. Before he could react, the rock hurled through the air. Stepping aside, it collided with the screen door of his house, shattering the glass into 1,000 fragments. Evidence. Pain rang out in Jared's voice as he yelled after Bobby Joe, but it was too late. She had already jumped into her car and sped off, leaving Jared standing there next to a pile of busted glass. He turned his gaze to the broken screen door, the shards of glass mocking him, a symbol of his neighborhood. Anger welled up within him as he glared at the taillights of Bobby Joe's car disappearing into the distance. The stress of the situation began to burn within him. He mumbled under his breath, venting his frustration into the air. Taking out his phone, Jared captured several photos of the broken screen door and the damage inflicted upon his home. He knew he needed more evidence, a recording of the attack. She would just pull together her group to say she was somewhere else. Slamming the door of his truck, he shook his head, a resolute expression crossing his face. "I've got to get out of this neighborhood," he muttered to himself, his voice filled with a mix of defiance and self-preservation. Upon returning to the hospital, Jared carried a heavy heart, filled with concern for his friend. He discovered that Alan had emerged successfully from surgery, but would require a 3-day stay in the hospital. Jared stood by Alan's side, providing words of encouragement and unwavering support. He took a moment to reassure Alan, mentioning that he had the keys to his place. They decided it would be best for Jared to stay at Alan's, to watch over things while Alan was in the hospital. The journey from the hospital remained quiet, but Jared found solace in knowing that Alan was in capable hands. After a few days, Jared confronted his vandalized house. The spiteful words and orange spray paint taunted him from the windows. "God-hater, liar, killer!" The accusations pierced his thoughts, stoking a fiery surge of anger. He traced his fingers over the graffiti. He had had enough of this neighborhood. He had discovered another broken window on the side of the house, facing Bobby Joe's property. Another rock laying conspicuously beneath the shattered glass, a damning clue pointing toward the source of the vandalism. Though he had no proof of her involvement, it was only a matter of time. Jared took out his phone, capturing photos of the broken window and the graffiti, determined to gather enough to pin it on her. Dialing the sheriff's office, Jared recounted the latest incident, providing details and sharing the photos he had taken. The deputy sheriff arrived, taking the report and offering little empathy. "Not much we can do without witnesses," the deputy sighed, leaving Jared feeling frustrated and helpless in the face of Bobby Joe's relentless torment. Jared's patience wore thin as he retrieved his mail. He considered the temporary respite of Alan's home a sanctuary from the hateful graffiti that now marred his own. Just as he turned to leave, the pond water's surface rippled, demanding his attention. Bobby Joe, a figure of defiance, materialized at the water's edge. Braving the barrier, she slipped through the gap cut open in the fence, vanishing into the ominous embrace of the pond. Jared shook his head, a mixture of concern and bewilderment coursing through his veins. How could he make her understand the danger she was willingly immersing herself in? But wait, he could get it on camera this time. With a swift motion, he pressed the record and aimed the camera towards the water's edge, awaiting her appearance. The wake of the water suggested she jumped in, but he knew at any moment he would have evidence against her. 10 seconds turned into 20, and then 30, but there's still no sign of Bobby Joe resurfacing. Something felt off. A minute passed, and still she remained underwater. 2 minutes elapsed, and a sense of unease crept over Jared. He needed to show her in the pond, not just some random splash. Slowly he inched his way toward the fence, his eyes fixated on the water, his phone still recording the pond's surface. 3 minutes went by. The suspense hung heavy in the air. Where was she? Doubt gnawed at his mind as he contemplated the situation. Just as he began to give up himself, he heard something running up behind him. Trailing shadows. Spinning around, Jared's heart pounded in his chest. A white blur was quickly gaining on him. The camera was still in his hand, ready to capture whatever was coming straight towards him. A sudden impact sent him reeling, his back slammed into the fence. "Hey, get out of here!" he yelled, his voice filled with a mixture of surprise and frustration. A flurry of noises filled the air as a startled goose flapped its wings. The goose soared over the fence and made a loud splash as it landed into the pond. Breathing heavy, Jared watched the goose swim away as he continued making a ruckus. Still, there was no sign of Bobby Joe. With a heavy sigh, he realized that time was slipping away and he needed to leave for Alan's place. Frustrated, he turned his back and made his way towards his truck. It had been a while, but this had made him remember when a man with tattoos was trying to break into Bobby Joe's place. Jared hadn't heard if they ever caught him or not. Good riddance. Pulling the door of his truck shut, the graffiti on his house and the broken windows were all he could think about on his drive to Alan's. The unanswered questions weighed heavy on his mind, but for now, His priority was to be there for his friend. Back at Alan's place, as Jared prepared sandwiches in the kitchen, he heard a faint ring of Alan's phone. Curiosity piqued. He approached, hearing his friend's one-sided conversation. Alan's face contorted with a mix of surprise and concern as he absorbed the news. The words were hushed, but their implications hung heavy in the air. Balancing a tray of sandwiches, iced teas, and chips, Jared entered the living room where Alan was seated. As they settled in side by side, the weight of their mutual challenges hung in the air. Without needing to ask, Alan revealed the reason for the call. "That was the CDC," he divulged. "Seems you were right about the grass. I need to see a doctor about lead poisoning." The words hung in the air, a sobering realization of the depth of their predicament. Jared coughed, still feeling aggravation of the scene he had just left behind. "What's going on with you, Jared?" Alan observed. "Bobby Joe still at it?" One of her nature buddies drove me into the fence earlier," Jared noted. Pulling out his phone, Jared showed him the broken window and graffiti Bobby Joe put all over his house. "We gotta go handle her, man," Alan added. "She's no good to nobody." "Karma might have handled her today." "Really?" Alan was relieved to hear. "What makes you say that?" Jared smirked. "She fell into the pond, and I stuck around for a good bit of time. Never saw her come back up for air." "Well, that's good news at least." Alan added, "I'm going to head back over there tomorrow. Set up a trail cam." "Have a couple of those at the store." Alan insisted. "Set them up at your place. I'd be offended if you didn't." Armed with the borrowed trail cameras from the Allen store, Jared returned to his property the following morning. As he neared the fence enclosing the pond, he spotted a pack of stray dogs lurking nearby, their gaze focused on the water's edge. Jared's heart raced as he observed the dogs taking advantage of the compromised barrier. "Hey, you mutts, get out of here!" Jared shouted, waving his arms as he approached them. The dogs dipped back out from the fence and scattered, retreating off into the woods. Jared shook his head, realizing the local animals were unaware of the toxic waters. As he surveyed the scene, he couldn't help but notice the water level of the pond was still dropping. Cracked patches of muddy ground that had previously been submerged were exposed. Not seeing any more wildlife, Jared turned and began setting up another trail cam strategically around his house. He made sure they covered the area near the fence and the pond. He positioned them discreetly, ensuring they wouldn't be easily noticed. With the cameras in place, he hoped to capture any suspicious activity and gather concrete evidence of the ones responsible for the vandalism on his house. Satisfied, Jared locked up his house and returned to Alan's. They discussed their plans to move forward, determined to bring the truth to light and put an end to the torment they had been enduring. The next day went by in a flash. Sleeping over at Alan's really let Jared rest through the night. As dusk settled over the neighborhood the next day, Jared couldn't help but feel a tingling sense of anticipation. The trail cameras stood as silent sentinels, capturing secrets as they lay concealed within the shadows. Would he finally catch them in the act? The night was filled with an eerie stillness, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. Jared couldn't wait. He decided to return to check the trail cam. A full day had passed, and he needed to swing by his house and check the mail anyway. He knew he had to act swiftly and retrieve the memory card from the trail camera so he could start cleaning up the neighborhood. He bid Alan farewell, promising to return with answers. Jared made his way back to his house, ready for a confrontation. The evening air felt cold. After checking the mail, he couldn't shake the feeling that every step he took was being watched. He reached the trail camera near the fence. Carefully, he swapped out the memory card, preserving the footage that could bring an end to this nonsense. As he pocketed the card, he couldn't help but cast a weary glance towards Bobby Joe's house, as if expecting her to materialize before him. His hands trembled as he rushed back to Alan's, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. They inserted the memory card into the computer, eager to watch the footage. The screen flickered to life, and they held their breath, their eyes fixed upon the unfolding events. The video played, showing Bobby Joe feeding the wildlife near the toxic pond. She was very much still alive, wandering around with a sinister smile dancing upon her lips. She was scattering breadcrumbs near the edge of the pond, by the looks of it, drawing in animals toward the water. Like marionettes, she was teaching them to love their poison. Jared's voice caught in his throat as he watched something. "Rewind the footage. What was that?" Jared insisted, his voice filled with urgency. They played the video back, seeing something unusual. With their gazes locked onto the screen, Jared's eyes widened in shock. It became clear he had been observed all along. While his attention was fixated on extracting the memory card, an intruder managed to sneak into the back of his truck undetected. Someone had ridden back to Allen's with him. With a firm grip on the doorknob, Jared flung open the front door and went outside. Noble heart. Jared's heart pounded as he stepped outside and spotted someone getting out of the back of his truck. His eyes narrowed as he took a step forward, ready to confront the thief. Jared yelled, "Hey, stop! What is that? What are you doing?" Before Jared could get fully outside, the man darted off into the copse of trees, carrying one of Jared's wrenches. The man was covered in tattoos, and his pants were falling off him. Limping to his truck, Jared coughed. He was still healing. Feeling frustrated, Jared decided not to pursue the man any further. It wasn't worth risking a confrontation, especially considering he was unarmed. He listened to the man run through the woods away from Allen's. The man was lost in the woods at night. He shook his head as the sound of the man faded into the distance. Turning back to the house, he found Allen struggling to stand up with a concerned expression.
What was all that about?
Allen asked, watching as Jared wrestled with the emotions he had inside him. Just some trouble from the neighborhood. Brushing off the encounter, not wanting to add more worries to Allen's plate. How do you, soldier?
Look, maybe it's time for a change. You've been thinking about leaving this neighborhood for a while now. Maybe this is the push you need to make that decision finally. Stay here till you get things figured out. I can't even get out of this chair if the man comes back tonight.
Jared nodded. You're right, but I doubt he'll be back. I'll start looking for a new place tomorrow. Jared helped himself to the couch, feeling a bit restless but too tired to dwell on things. Unlike Allen, he went to sleep quickly. There was something about Allen's place that helped him rest easy, probably because Bobby Joe wasn't next door. He woke up the next morning with a sigh, realizing he might have brought trouble to Allen's house. He didn't want to overstay his welcome. After breakfast, Jared headed to the grocery store to get some boxes to pack up his belongings. He then returned to his house, where he was greeted with a mix of emotions. As he approached the driveway, his gaze fell upon the graffiti and broken windows. Stepping inside, he started cleaning up the glass from the floor. Another brick had sailed through the air and hit a picture on his desk. It was the only one he had taken with his dad before he went to Afghanistan, capturing a cherished moment of them working together on an old truck. Jared remembered it like it was yesterday, his dad trying to get the oil filter off, their laughter filling the air. The photo was a symbol of their bond and the workshop they had shared. His heart raced as he continued packing his belongings, the memories of his dad flooding back to him. His father's workshop, a space filled with the scent of oil and the hum of machinery, had been a source of immense pride. It was where he dedicated hours to mending friends' cars and pursuing a myriad of projects. These memories were Jared's treasures, especially after his dad passed away while Jared was serving in Afghanistan, earning him a Purple Heart. Jared always believed the Purple Heart belonged to his father, a symbol of his sacrifice and bravery. Carefully packing up the old photo of his dad, Jared deeply exhaled. The wrench that was stolen last night was all he had left of his father's workshop. Having it taken from him felt like losing a piece of his dad all over again. Having a stack of boxes in the middle of the living room, Jared realized how much stuff he had accumulated over the 10 years he'd lived there. With a deep breath, he made his decision. It was time for a change. While lost in thoughts, the noise from Bobby Joe's house next door grew louder. A few cars pulled up, and it was evident that the party was just getting started. Jared clenched his fists, trying to block out the sounds and focus on packing. But it was hard to ignore the chaos next door, especially when the police arrived. Glass shattered and Bobby Joe's voice rang out, defiant and angry.
You can't go into my house without a warrant!
She yelled at the police. But the officers seemed undeterred, their expression resolute. Step aside, one of them said firmly.
You don't have a warrant!
Bobby Joe retorted, her voice filled with desperation. Jared couldn't help but glance outside, watching the police through his broken window. Stand aside, Bobby Joe. The cop advanced. I hear glass breaking and someone screaming. That's probable cause. pressing charges. Bobby Joe's voice rang out in frustration, her face contorted with anger as she protested.
It's my house, and I'm not pressing charges!
Jared watched with a mix of annoyance at her actions, knowing that without her cooperation, there wasn't much the police could do. As the officers spoke to her, Jared could see their weariness with her antics. Bobby Joe yelled at the cop.
It's gotta be him over there! I don't get in other people's business! I never get into other people's business!
After the lady that was screaming came outside, one officer documented the situation. He then turned and saw Jared's place, broken and covered in graffiti. As the officer approached, he had a calm and professional demeanor. He explained that they had a record of being at Bobby Joe's house, and she was linked to vandalism throughout the neighborhood. Jared breathed a sigh of relief, grateful they seemed more inclined to believe his side of the story. She nearly hit me with a brick, throwing it at my house. Jared sighed. I've seen all the violence. People don't know how hard it is when you've been at war. I saw plenty when I was a Navy SEAL. All I want is peace. All this started when the EPA began shutting down the pond. Backlash at me for letting the EPA know it was poisoned is her motivation. She thinks it's a conspiracy to get her to use town water instead of a natural water source. The officer nodded empathically while surveying the vandalism, silently grasping the toll such experiences could take on a person. He assured Jared that they would keep an eye on the situation and encouraged him to continue documenting any incidents. After the encounter with the police, Jared returned inside, feeling a mix of emotions as he looked at the stack of boxes in his living room. The stolen wrench had been more than just an object. It was a connection to his father and the memories they had shared in the workshop. The thought of leaving this place, filled with cherished memories, cloaked him in silence. Jared received a call from John, his lifelong friend from the EPA, who had been eager to visit him.
I've got a couple days off, Jared. I'll be there in about an hour and a half. I've got to stop in at my hotel tonight. Let's meet up for lunch tomorrow.
The night went by without any further disturbances. Jared sat and watched the trees before bed. Getting to see John was something he had been wanting for a while. The next day, they pulled into a steakhouse, and it was as if a cloud passed over John.
I could probably lose my job for what I'm going to tell you, buddy. But we have to be careful, and you can't tell anyone what I'm going to reveal.
Leaving their phones in the car, they both made their way inside. Over the meal, they went over the events of the past few weeks. John listened carefully to Jared's recollection of everything. Jared decided to order something for Alan and felt it would be a nice surprise to bring home to him. After hearing Jared and Alan had been poisoned, they needed to know the truth. Clearing his throat, John whispered,
When I was writing down some info of what we found in the pond water, I stumbled across a file from the 1960s.
Cutting into a steak and enjoying it, he continued.
The government systematically poisoning this country's water supply. Follow-up was done in 1999, but it provided no clear reason for poisoning us. The poisoning caused all manner of diseases, brain fog, degenerative joints, and a plethora of other ailments. We were told it was fluoride to prevent cavities, but in addition to fluoride, it was discovered in the reports it was more like rat poison and other dangerous chemicals. Over the 40-plus years between the reports, the amount added had increased to 20 times the initial amount. I couldn't print it off without somebody asking why. Well, this is unsettling. I'm treading very carefully, but I'll try to keep you in the loop.
After eating, he finished with,
Listen, Jared, we don't know what's in the pond, but we're going to have to drain it. The toxic pond poses too much of a risk, and draining it seemed like the safest course of action to analyze its contents thoroughly.
Jared nodded. You're right. We need to know what's in there before it causes more harm. His mind raced with the possibilities of what they might uncover. He knew deep down someone was making money off of this somehow. Getting up from the table, John explained,
I've been analyzing the water samples you collected last time. The contamination levels higher than we anticipated. The pond is getting worse by the day, meaning it's still going on.
Jared winced. So what are we dealing with here? Is it a hazardous chemical spill or?
The signs are pointing towards some form of toxic waste out. A disturbing pattern emerged in the data, indicating a deliberate cover-up that could involve influential individuals. Someone is trying to keep this hidden.
John's voice was hushed with caution.
People connected to this case are having things happen to them.
What kind of things? Jared searched. As they walked out to their trucks, a ringing phone caught their attention. It was Jared's. Looking through the window of his truck, he saw Alan's name on the screen. Standing with John, he opened the truck door and answered the phone. Hey, Alan, what's up? Silence followed on the other end. Alan, is everything okay? He spoke up, shaking his head and looking to John. Still, there was no response, only an eerie rustling sound. Alan, can you hear me? Jared's voice climbed. I'm headed that way. Hanging up the phone, leaving the restaurant, John followed him back to Alan's. As they pulled in, the door to Alan's home was wide open. Unleashed. Alan! Jared called out. Alan! Bursting into the open home, Jared and John searched the house, but there was no sign of him. Calling Alan again, he wasn't answering his phone.
Jared,
Incited John.
I see him.
Out an open window, a man lay in the grassy field, motionless. Charging outside, they listened to the silence of the trees. Alan! They yelled as they approached him. Kneeling down, they noticed he was breathing, but as white as a ghost. Rolling him onto his back. Sit up for us, buddy. Can you stand? With a moan, Alan handed Jared a wet wrench. For a tense moment, Jared didn't expect to get his father's wrench back after it was stolen. How did Alan get it back in his condition? Helping him back to his feet, they struggled with his crutches inside, returning Alan to his chair. Alan wasn't speaking. I've seen people that white before, Jared noted. It was when I was at war. Let's get him checked out. A resistant groan came from Alan as he shook his head. You sure? Alan nodded weakly and closed his eyes. Jared and John exchanged uncertain glances, left standing there, not knowing what to do. Signaling John into the other room, they made plans to take action. I was in a similar state to Alan, Jared remarked. I think I told you about seeing the neighbor dragging someone towards the pond that one night. The police couldn't find anyone, but I can tell you that he saw something like I did.
I want to go see this pond that everything is tied to,
John stated. Leaving Alan's, they both made their way back to Jared's place. Jared parked his vehicle by the pond. His gaze remained fixated on the water. John wasn't far behind him, but he hadn't yet arrived. There was a thick, sour odor in the air, and he noticed that the water level was still dropping. Each ripple of the surface told a story of disturbance, like there was a voice trying to speak. Upon John's arrival, Jared was busy shooing away a group of stray dogs that were lapping up the water from the tainted pond. Jared's house was a wreck. Seeing it firsthand, John engaged in a heartfelt dialogue. He saw Bobby Joe's vandalism and how she cut through the fence, allegedly. Jared pointed toward his house and noted how Bobby Joe's friends were defending her, claiming she had nothing to do with it. Pulling John closer, Jared whispered, I'll set up a few trail cams now. It's only a matter of time. Stepping back, Jared pointed towards the pond. That's it. Both men walked up to the chain-link fence, the putrid smell growing more intense as they drew near.
Stagnant pond water is usually bad, but this stinks,
John noted.
How long has it been this bad?
It's worse today, I think, explained Jared. Much worse than before. As they circled the fence, both of them suddenly froze. John instinctively grabbed the sleeve of Jared's jacket, though Jared had already spotted it. Something peculiar and gruesome was emerging from the exposed belly of the pond, a stiff, lifeless hand. The oppressive summer heat had unveiled a grim secret, and panic surged through them. John reached for his phone without hesitation, his trembling fingers dialing the sheriff's office. The authorities arrived with remarkable speed, donning shiny hazmat suits, ready to confront the unknown. Their eyes widened in disbelief as they beheld it, a deformed hand protruding from the pond. What else lay hidden beneath the surface? With cautious, deliberate steps, the police approached the scene, on edge. Something had been gnawing on the fingers. The mangled corpse was overrun by a writhing mass of mutant sludge worms, their relentless consumption almost otherworldly. Even the bones seemed to dissolve before their eyes. No one knew if the worms had the ability to consume bone, but who could say? All the efforts to identify the body proved futile. Dental records were useless, as the person's teeth had been eroded by years of drug addiction. The body had become an enigma, impossible to recognize. The mysterious mutant worms were unlike anything they had ever encountered. A rope was tethered to the body, keeping it submerged. Was someone feeding the worms? As the police wrapped the lifeless form in black plastic, Jared and John walked along the edge of the pond, shrouded in an eerie silence. John turned to Jared.
I wasn't expecting this today. And then I just had dinner. I was only planning on maybe testing the soil and making plans to detoxify this pond. This is a sprawling crime scene now.
Jared nodded, his eyes fixated on the murky water. John sighed, his gaze distant.
But we might face some trouble, especially from Bobby Joe. If there's something hidden in there that powerful people want to keep hidden, it won't go down without a fight.
Jared clenched his fists, a determined look in his eyes. "Hey, fellas," the sheriff called out. "Hang on a second." They both turned to be greeted by the law enforcement. "We need you all to come down to the station."
Come out now!
Shouted an officer towards the rustling bushes. Everyone turned to see a group of officers, guns drawn, their eyes wide with shock. "Have you seen her?" One of them shouted, his voice urgent. "What is that?" And then, in a horrifying moment, they watched as Bobby Joe's face appeared in the bushes, her eyes wide and feral. The officers' guns trembled in their hands as she crawled out of the bushes, but her body, her hair hung matted, clumped in mud, but her transformation was underway. Her skin was a slimy mess, swollen and sloughing off. Sliding into view, Bobby Joe's head lunged out, snarling and baring teeth. Tainted blood.
Get on the ground! Hands where I can see them! Now!
The lead officer shouted. The mist from the pond began to rise. Bobby Joe lurched from the underbrush. Leaves clung to her matted hair. Her skin stretched thin, like wax melting off a candle. Worms pulsed beneath the flesh like living veins. Her eyes locked on Jared. Recognition burned there, twisted and hungry. Something red dripped from her face. It hit the mud with a sickening plop.
Jared stood by his truck, but he couldn't look away.
"Bobby Joe."
"What were you doing in the bushes?"
Her mouth twisted into a wet, gurgling grin. Her head tilted in an impossible angle, faster than her ruined body should allow. "You think it's only mine? This water? This life? It's roiling inside of you, Jared! Coursing through your veins!" Jared felt the tremor in his hands, the pond's toxins already stirring. He reached into the back of his truck and found his father's wrench. He palmed it low and kept it out of sight.
Bobby Joe, stay where you are!
One officer shouted. The name tag glinted. Callahan. But she kept approaching, arms extended. She began to run.
Bobby Joe! The officer barked. Stop!
She didn't care. She didn't listen. Bang! The shot cracked through the humid air. Bobby Joe shrieked. Her knee exploded in a spray of wriggling threads, splattering the mud around her. She collapsed forward. Her fingers slipped off Jared's arm as blood began to pool beneath her leg.
Shots fired! Subject down!
Callahan radioed, his voice cracked with panic.
"Dad, I don't want to! We need paramedics over here now!"
His hands shook as he holstered his weapon. Regret flashed across his face. He looked sick, but Bobby Joe kept clawing at the gravel, dragging her ruined leg behind her. Jared's fists clenched around the wrench. His nails dug into his palms as she inched closer to him. The paramedics approached fast but cautious. Bobby Joe crackled, high-pitched, like something rising from the depths. Her eyes shot up at him.
"What's that, Jared?"
She eyed the wrench in his hand.
"Your dad's? Why do you never visit his house? Why do you stay away from your past? It's waiting for you, just like the pond."
Thinking back, were the boxes she was reading through his family's clothes? Had she been stealing from his family this whole time? Officer Callahan approached, voice softer now.
"Ma'am, be still. Help is on the way."
As he knelt beside her, she saw the gun on his hip. Rage poured from her eyes.
Jared! Jared, you see what you're doing to me, don't you?
Her blood spread in the gravel.
All of you are doing this!
She swiped at him. Nails raked Officer Callahan's forearm deep. Blood welled instantly, mixing with her slime. Tiny worm-like shadows pulsed in the wound and burrowed in. Callahan's eyes widened.
"Son of a..."
He grunted, staggering back, clutching his arm. The paramedics moved in, eager to stop the bleeding. "Everyone get back!" Callahan barked, holding his arm. "Bobby Joe, stop!" She screamed. She swung at the paramedics. Then her eyes fixed back on Jared's hand. The wrench.
Jared?
Her voice sliced through the night.
I know where you got that wrench!
She taunted. She twisted violently, snapping and tearing at everyone. She surged to her feet, ripped free, and lunged toward the medics. Shots rang out. Bang! Bang! The first grazed her shoulder. The second splintered a pine inches from her head, sending bark flying. But she was already free, already running. She rushed in the bushes, vanishing north, leaving a trail of blood on the leaves. John grabbed Jared's arm, yanking him back.
"She's heading straight for Allen's."
The officers charged after her, guns popping faintly through the trees. Branches snapped. Minutes later, one officer stumbled back, soaked and heaving. Callahan leaned against the tree, sweat beading from his forehead, arm trembling, eyes glazing. We tagged her good. She's bleeding out. Won't get far." His voice cracked again. He winced as if something crawled inside him, deeper. The lead officer wiped the mud from his face, keyed the radio.
Suspect hit twice. Heavy breathing. Headed north. The pond is locked down."
He paused, glanced at the paramedics covering the pond's corpse. Jared's mind raced. Toxins linked everything. Pond water, mutated worms, Bobby Joe. But at least now they knew. Now they could contain it. Jared climbed into the truck. John slid beside him.
Bobby Joe's the last loose end.
As the engine roared to life, Jared popped open his pill bottle, swallowed two dry. But as he gripped the wheel harder, the toxins were in him, spreading slow and sure. He'd fight it. He'd clean up this mess. Nothing would stop him. Not the water, not the infected, not whatever nightmare stood in his way. Well, thank you for listening to Pond Water. It was my first audiobook I'd ever narrated. I did everything myself, edited, handled the sound work. Well, the reason... I understand many people have reading disabilities, and physically reading a book is tough nowadays in our busy lives. And being dyslexic myself, it's very hard for me to sit down and enjoy a book because I fumble over the words. So if reading's a fight for you too, this is our rebellion. If you'd like to continue the adventure, grab Pondwater Riptide. Alternatively, dive into another book following the Callahans in the Feral Files. But know this, all the sales of my books are going to help others. I hope to be a part of the next time you pick up a book.